Disclaimer. Unapologetically Gangster. The Don Kawand Story. Book 1, subtitle, Marlboro and Coney Island. Story 40. Now, I can't vouch for any other city, but in Brooklyn as young teenagers, you were forced to tussle with another young boy or a group of mischievous misfits. Running was not an option, except when it was a wise thing to do. The young boys from Sea-Rise, Coney Island, had chased me and my homie off the island. What originally started with my boy G ended up with Abe and myself, but we was family, so I didn't mind the position I found myself in. After making it to Marlboro, my legs felt like spaghetti and my feet was burning as I desperately tried to catch my breath. My heart was beating fast and adrenaline was still running through my body as I asked everyone had they seen Abe. After about 20 minutes in panic mode, I finally got the relief needed. Homie came bouncing through one of the buildings in good condition. It was crazy how he had similar thoughts of me being hurt badly as I had about him. But fortunately, and this is all facts, neither one of us had a scar on us worth noticing. What pained us the most was our pride. Pride is another characteristic trait found in a gangster. We just can't let shit go. Abe and I had a meeting of the minds that night that I'm sure we both understood who we were as young boys. Living the life of a sucker wasn't in us. It was not a part of our life's agenda. We needed to go back to Coney Island. We had to go back to Sea-Rise. And that's exactly what we did. Being the young boys that we were, decided to move out the following Friday evening. Except for this time, we was going to be strapped and ready to lay any one of them boys down. Abe had a neighbor, a quiet fella, with a car that agreed to drive us out there. We chose Friday night with the anticipation of catching them sleeping, hopes of them enjoying their Friday atmosphere as we ruined their evening. It took us 5 minutes to get out to Sea-Rise, and Abe's neighbor dropped us off at the West 33rd Street entrance, directly across the street from Gravesend. Our intentions and focus were mainly on Roger, the only one whose face I remembered. Okay, check out how Abe and I are moving at the young age of 16. We jump out the vehicle with our hands tightly gripped on our straps. We then run through Sea-Rise, searching for some action, but got nothing. We chased a couple of kids off the basketball court. They slid off when they spotted us lurking, with them hammers in our hands and dressed in all black. We maneuvered around Sea-Rise for a few minutes before finding ourselves at their local shopping area, and everyone we spotted, we questioned about the young boy Roger. I made sure to mention his name, only to send a message that there was no sucker in my blood, and I was looking to hurt him badly. We had the driver take the vehicle around to the Neptune Avenue entrance of Sea-Rise. Abe and I hung out around the shopping center area for a few minutes, questioning and screwballing folks, looking to start a little trouble, but I guess everyone knew exactly why we were on the premises. After a few minutes, Abe and I jumped in the vehicle to head back to Marlboro. Once inside of the vehicle, Abe stuck his arm outside of the passenger window, and with the ratchet in his hand, he sounded off 2 shots in the air, just for good measures. The next day, I received a call from Big Bro, who had no idea that Abe and I was creeping through his hood the night before. Apparently, Roger wanted to squash the beef, and that's how we pretty much left it. Roger and I would grow respectful to each other on sight. Later in life, I would have to get this boy out of a jam after he had some car trouble on Atlantic Avenue. One cold evening, Roger was in a vehicle with his family, stranded, and I made sure they got home safely, bonding our friendship for life. I also grow extremely close with both Abe and Supreme for life. It's something about being in the trenches with a comrade that just brings you closer. The respect between the three of us would last forever. Brooklyn in the 1980s was a deadly city, so aligning yourself with G's that were not afraid to travel or get it in when their back was up against the wall was a survival tactic. Therefore, I got close and personal with mostly scrappy young boys when moving through the most dangerous streets of Brooklyn. But unfortunately, my life of crime and unruly behavior would catch up with me, and I would find myself on Rikers Island, one of the most dangerous prisons in the United States. This is the end of Story 40, the Don Kawand story. Unapologetically Gangster, the Don Kawand story. Book 1, subtitle, Marlboro and Coney Island. Story 41. Now, Abe and I met during a childish graffiti war, but bonded hard body from 85 to 86. We was moving hard together, doing a string of what I call strong arm robberies. That's choking out white folks for their jewelry and money. We were physically brutal to our victims. They were choked out, beaten badly, cut, and at times had their shoes and socks snatched off. Oh yes, that's where the stash was usually kept when running up on a victim after dark. And it was common for us to pull up on Lafayette High School bleachers and ruin the night for a whole group of white kids. We brought razor blades out when moving on more than 4 or 5 white kids at a time, although we had ratchets in the crib. For some reason, we never thought to bring them out and become stick-up kids. We was comfortable with the hand-to-hand combat anytime. Robbing people that looked like us was a no-no. I would also get close and personal with a few other young boys in Marlboro that was about that strong arm life. Young boys like a kid named Universal and his younger brother Black that lived in Building 3. My childhood friend Light would also get in on some of the action. And at times, my boy Gerald and a young beast with hands from the 16th floor in 30 Rock. His name was Lamar, but we called him L.A., aka Bounce. G and I never went out on the hunt, but took something if the opportunity presented itself. Oh, I almost forgot a young boy named JR, aka Wolfie, and when he wasn't in Marlboro, hung out a lot in Flatbush with the Jamaicans. He was one of the first kids in Marlboro that I saw come through on a dirt bike, doing a wheelie back in the days. But anyway, together we all schemed on unexpected white folks, like predators. We never really went out hunting together, usually in pairs. Every now and then we'd all get together for a good old burglary, but that's about it. At one time or another, all my homies had been to Rikers Island at one time or another, except myself and G. Most of our crimes took place locally with the racist white folks. We took joy in ruining their day. Most of our families were struggling to survive financially, and we needed some change in our pockets. I can't vouch for my comrades, but I had outgrown the $20 a week allowance Mama Love had been giving me, and I couldn't wait till school year started just to get some new clothes. But whenever we wasn't creeping locally, Abe and I ventured out of the projects the most whenever G wasn't around, and we stand side by side many a nights and days fighting the odds. I seen it in his eyes that night in C-Rise, but I also saw it once again in Gawand's projects. We was out there just before the summer at a UTFO concert featuring Roxanne and some other new hip-hop artists. Hip-hop was new, so every concert was off the chain. Unlike Madison Square Garden, this one was outside next to a project that had nothing but Spanish folks. For those that don't know, Gowanus is located a few blocks away from downtown Brooklyn. Nice little projects, up in the cut. Anyway, Abe and I spot James and KB, 2 brothers that lived in Marlboro that we knew, but we weren't really friendly with at this time in our lives. They were with about 30 to 50 young, hardcore looking dudes from across town, and they were causing havoc. We see them robbing everything and everybody and decided to get in on the melee. The Puerto Ricans eventually outnumbered the blacks, and Abe and I had to fight our way out of the neighborhood. We would run a few blocks, stop and fight with a couple, run a few more blocks, stop and fight with a couple, before we finally ran in different directions. And just like in Coney Island, we both made it home safely without a scar to talk about. That's how we were growing up. We were being groomed to be bad boys and eventually gangsters the Brooklyn way. But my life of crime would eventually catch up with me. This is the end of Story 41, the Don Kawand story. Unapologetically Gangster, the Don Kawand story. Book 1, subtitle, Marlboro and Coney Island, Story 42. Now in the spring of 1986, just before the summer, I'd find myself in some serious trouble. G and I would visit Rikers Island for the first time. I had only heard stories of wannabe gangsters and even official gangsters getting ripped across their faces. Most were stabbed at random or had their clothes or sneakers taken right off of them. It's where law-breaking youngsters in New York City found themselves when they couldn't afford bail, and you stayed there until you either got bailed out, beat the case, or got sentenced to time and shipped to a prison somewhere upstate New York. Rikers Island has a building where you can do time at also, only if it's less than a year. C-76 is the building. C-76, also referred to as the 6th building, and a place that I'd eventually spend a few weeks. But I would visit the inside of C-74 first, the ultimate gladiator school for unruly and hardcore adolescents, New York's most dangerous. But anyway, one Friday night, G and I would venture out to Coney Island, the amusement park area. Now, although Coney Island is at war with one another, there is 2 times in life where the unruly and the most dangerous ones get together. 1, whenever they're coming to Marlboro to cause havoc, and 2, whenever they visit the amusement park area on a Friday or Saturday night. Them boys would be in the amusement park area, terrorizing the entire park. So on this Friday night, G and I get in the mix with them. We're running through the crowd, wilding as if we was in Manhattan. Most of the young bad boys knew one another, and G and I was fitting right in. After a long night of banging some people for some jewelry, G and I decided to walk home to Marlboro. But on our way home, we spot a victim, or so we thought. G and I move in for the kill and take him for everything he got. But being young and naive, before we reached Marlboro, had the police pull up on us with this man in the backseat of the car. They put them bracelets on us, and we spent the next couple of days going through what we call bullpen therapy. That's when you spend a couple of nights going from one precinct to the other, eating cold McDonald's and cold coffee for breakfast, and bologna sandwiches with mustard for dinner. After we finally saw the judge, he granted us a bail, and before being bailed out, I was on the first bus to Rikers Island. G had to wait for the second bus, so therefore I was on the blue and orange bus with other crooks taking that trip. When the bus hit the BQE, it was one of the bumpiest rides I ever had in my life. But reality set in when we pulled up to the front of the bridge that took you over to Rikers Island. I remember my stomach bubbling and the nerves was beginning to shake and rattle in my entire body as we crossed that long bridge in the middle of the night. The water and the bright lights on the island screamed serious business. The barbed wires that surrounded the entire island was enough to put the fear of God in any young boy. But it didn't get real till they pulled up in front of a building that had C-74 written above the doorway. The bus dropped off about 20 of us, and as we entered the building, found ourselves in what they call the reception area. It's a small room with like 12 individual cells and a couple of desks. One, the correction officers were behind, and the other desk had 2 inmates that was processing the newbies. We spent the entire day being processed. That meant a violating strip search in the shower area by the correction officers. It was one of the most degrading moments in a young boy's life to be standing shoulder to shoulder with 20 young naked boys all squatting as the correction officers searched us inside and out for contraband. After the degrading strip search and a shower, they took us to the clinic. While sitting in the clinic, waiting to be checked, a big light-skinned fella came in with the whole left side of his face bust open. Blood was squirting and dripping down the side of his neck as they rushed him to the back. This boy had to be about 6 feet tall, 220, solid, and he was in bad shape. This was the first taste of how serious it was on Rikers Island for me personally. After the shock of the clinic, we went back to our cells in the reception area until a bed was available. Spending hours with strangers brought some of us closer. Most of us were cool and began discussing how to survive. A couple of us had managed to pull a large nail from the ceiling. It appeared to have been under some kind of construction or just raggedy at the time. We took turns watching the COs while we all sharpened the point of the nails to be used as weapons. Now it's about 5 or 6 of us that are armed with nails. Even though we were armed, it was every man for himself. We were on Rikers Island, but there was a door that we had to walk through that would have us in the belly of the beast, or what most would call population. My biggest concern was getting cut in the face, and it weighed heavily on my mind as we waited patiently to be amongst New York City's most dangerous young boys. This is the of story 42, the Don Kawand story. Now click subscribe, click like, and share, because somebody needs to hear this.